Yashodhanandana Prajagana Sandana Yashodhanandana Prajagana Sandana Yamunadira Pavanadhari Yamunadira Vanadhari Jayu Haram Madhav Kundavi Sahas Jaya Haram Kundavi Sahas Jaya Gopidanam Girivardhan Jaya Gopidanam Girivardhan Yashodan Nandanam Rajadana Saharan Yashodan Nandana Rajadana Saharan Yamuna Dida Vanadisati Yamuna Dida Vanadisati Vidyasaram Adha Tundavisa Gayatana Sadapa Tundavisa Gayatridhanava Sabha Girivardhana Gayatridhanava Girivardhana Yasodhan Nandana Pujadana Yaso Sandana Pujadana Yamunadira Yamunadira Bhavanadhan Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Om Vishnu Padavaham Sattvavidacharya Shodasatya Srimad. His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Padavaham Sattvavidacharya Shodasatya Srimad. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Kantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Nita Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 9, titled Prahlad Pacifies Lord Narasimhadev with Prayers. Text number 20. Yasmin yato yarhiyana chayasya yasmad. Yasmayatai yadutai yastiv apara parova. Bhava karoti vikaroti pratak swabhava. Sanchoditas tadakilam bhavata swarupam. Yasmin yato yarhyena chayasya yasman. Yasmayata yaduta yastiv apara parova. Bhava karoti vikaroti Pritak Swabhava Sanchoditas Tadakilam Bhavata Swarupam Yasmin Yato Yarhyena Chayasya Yasma Yasmayata Yaduta Yastiv Apara Var Parova Bhava karoti vikaroti pretak swabhava sanchoditas tadakilam bhavata swarupam. Yasmin, in any condition. Yata, because of anything. Yarhi, at any time, past, present, or future. Yena, by something. Cha, also. Yasya, in relationship with anyone. Yasmat, from any causal representative. Yasmai, onto anyone, without discrimination in regard to place, person, or time. Yata, in any manner. Yat, whatever it may be. Utta, certainly. Ya, anyone who. Tu, but. Apara, the other. Para, the supreme. Va, or. Bhava, being. Karoti, does. Vikaroti, changes. Pritak, separate. Swabhava, nature, under the influence of different modes of material nature. Sanchodita, being influenced. Tat, that. Akilam, all. Bhavata, of your lordship. Swarupam, emanated from your different energies. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. My dear Lord, everyone in this material world as under the modes of material nature, being influenced by goodness, passion, and ignorance. Everyone, from the greatest personality, Lord Brahma, down to the smallest ant, works under the influence of these modes. Therefore, everyone in this material world is influenced by your energy. The cause for which they work, the place where they work, the time when they work, the matter due to which they work, the goal of life they have considered final, and the process for obtaining this goal. All are nothing but manifestations of your energy. Indeed, since the energy and energetic are identical, all of them are but manifestations of you. Purport. Whether one thinks himself protected by his parents, by the government, by some place, or by some other cause, everything is due to the various potencies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everything that is done, whether in the higher, middle, or lower planetary systems, is due to the supervision or control of the Supreme Lord. It is therefore said, Karmana Daivanachrena Datur Deho Papataye. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the super soul within the core of everyone's heart, gives inspiration for action according to one's mentality. All of these mentalities are merely facilities given by Krishna to perform the person acting. Bhagavad Gita therefore says, Mata smirtir jnanam apohanam cha. Everyone works according to the inspiration given by the super soul. Because everyone has a different goal of life, everyone acts differently, as guided by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The words Yasmin Yato Yarhi Yana Chayasya Yasmat indicates that all activities, whatever they may be, are but different features of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All of them are created by the living entity and fulfilled by the mercy of the Lord. Although all such activities are non-different from the Lord nonetheless directs. Sarvadharman parityaja mam ekam sharanam vraja. Give up all other duties and surrender unto me. When we accept this direction from the Lord, we can actually become happy. As long as we work according to our material senses, we are in material life. But as soon as we act according to the real transcendental direction of the Lord, our position is spiritual. The activities of bhakti, devotional service, are directly under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Narada Panchacharaka states, Sarvapadi vinirmuktam tat parat vena nirmalam hirshikena hirshikesha sevanam bhaktir uchyate. When one gives up materially designated positions and works directly under the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one's spiritual life is revived. This is described as Svarupena Avastiti, being situated in one's original constitutional position. This is the real description of mukti, or liberation from material bondage. Om Agena Taramandasya Kilinjana Shlataya Chakshamatamyana Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sarigor Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So at this point in the prayers of Prahlad Maharaj to Lord Narasimhadev, Prahlad is pointing out the supreme position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the fact that there actually is no other shelter than the Supreme Person in the material world or even in the spiritual world. We see, for example, in the case of earlier in this pastime, Hiranyakashipu, Prahlad Maharaj's father, took shelter of the process of mystic yoga, that he performed austerities that were quite severe uh, for a very, very, very long time. Many times in the present lifetime, in this age. And he thought that by performing these austerities, by taking shelter of this process of mystic yoga, he could become free from death, which of course didn't work. We all know the pastime. We have been reading it. And then, of course, a few days ago, there was Lord Nrsimhadev's appearance day. So I think we are all familiar with the pastime of how uh, Hiranyakashipu's plan to become immortal failed. And what is being pointed out in this verse and purport is that all such material plans fail. We see that everyone in the world is looking for some sort of shelter. We want to think ourselves protected by something or another. We have this feeling that, uh, so this intuition that we can't make it on our own, that we need to be a part of something or be under something greater than ourselves. And there are so many examples of things that people take shelter of. Some are listed in this purport, right? Especially when we are young, we take shelter of our parents. Uh, we depend, of course, a child depends on the parents for everything. Uh, even to go from one place or another to another, to have food. Uh, the child is completely dependent on the parents. Uh, but of course, we understand that the protection of the parents is not absolute. Uh, we realize, well, of course, there's the obvious example of the unfortunate fact that there are many children who die, uh, and even less literally. Uh, Once you reach a certain age, you realize that your parents don't know everything, uh, and that sometimes, at least for some people, their parents don't know all that much at all, and that they are unable to provide protection. Prabhupada also mentions, the government. Um, it used to be the idea that, oh, the government is there to protect us. The government serves our interests, um, and uh, we can depend upon uh, the state to, provide for us, or at least give us the opportunity to provide for ourselves, to protect us, to facilitate uh, us living a good life. I don't know anybody who has been paying attention, at least, who seriously believes anymore that the government uh, does those things. Uh, you know, that doesn't necessarily need elaboration. It's a obvious facts at this point. Um, and then even some other causes. I just mentioned that the government is uh, not mm, giving us protection, that they are, a conspiracy of crooks, and the reaction that some people have to this reality of government and industry and all these things uh, crushing the little man. Uh, a lot of people, uh, when they realize the actual situation there, become interested in alternative economic ideas. Like there's a uh, resurgence and interest in socialism, for example, even in this country, because people are saying, oh, the government and the corporations are not giving me shelter. So they say, let me take shelter in this cause, the working people of the world. Uh, workers of the world unites. All you have left to lose is your chains. All these things that they say. Of course, we understand that uh, that will not give them shelter either. We've tried it, um, and uh, this kind of Marxist ideas or other mundane economic ideas do not work either. They do not actually give protection, but it only lead to more exploitation. And even in our personal lives, we sometimes take shelter of a certain uh, process or cause or idea that we think can help us or give us satisfaction. There are so many things that people take up. Uh, sometimes even people who are on the Catholic devotional service, who have come into contact with Prabhupada's books, uh, leave ISKCON uh, and go join some, deviant philosophy. You know, uh, they might go become a Sahaja or something like that. I remember there's this one person who was coming along uh, back in Philadelphia, and she was reading the books, chanting, all these things, uh, and she decided to take a trip to Vrindavan. Sounds very nice. Vrindavan, is, one of the best places in the world. It's a very spiritual, spiritually potent place. But while she was there, she met this Sahaja group. And she got into her head, oh, I can come Krishna conscious, but not have to follow the regulative principles, especially not have to follow one specific regulative principle. And of course, got totally confused uh, because of this half-hen idea that the Sahajas have. Of course, there are other deviations that come that people sometimes take shelter of. But even, even more widely, uh, sometimes there are, uh, various ideas of what we think um, that, that become popular in the society of devotees, that we take shelter of these different processes or philosophies or methods of doing things. One example that comes to mind, it was a bit before my time, before I joined, but maybe some of our more senior members uh, recall that I heard from a more senior devotee that for a certain time, everybody in ISKCON was a follower of Stephen Covey, the Seven Habits of Highly Successful People. And, they would quote him or whatever, um, as if it was Shastra. Not that there's anything wrong per se with Stephen Covey, uh, but um, whenever we can use these different processes, uh, but uh, don't become too, but we should not become too invested in philosophies outside devotional service. Another one that comes to mind is using mundane psychology. This is very popular among, uh, there's a very popular approach of introducing um, ideas from different mm, methods or philosophies within the mundane psychological world um, to attempt to help us in our devotional service. And it's not uh, that, this has no merit. We can use everything in devotional service. But we should be very careful in realizing that actually these methods will not give us satisfaction. Uh, and I'll say specifically in the realm of psychology, sometimes these different methods or ideas depend on things that are, or depend on philosophies or ontologies that are actually opposite or against Shastra. That's a whole other topic. That's a bigger thing. But the point is that if we take shelter of all of these uh, processes or things, whether it's mundane psychology or the government or Marxism or our parents, they will all ultimately fail us because the only shelter is Krishna. Everything else is influenced by the modes of nature, sattva, tamas, and rajas. And anything that is under the modes of nature is definitionally material. And we understand that all material things have six transformations. They come into existence, they grow, they maintain themselves for some time, they produce byproducts, they uh, dwindle, and then ultimately they go out of existence. All material things are subject to these six transformations. It is, one definition you could give of what it means to be material. And thus, because these shelters um, cannot actually protect themselves, they cannot provide protection to us. But still, we wish to take protection from them. Therefore, the Supreme Lord, as the Supersoul, gives us the facility to do all of these things. The Supersoul is in everyone's heart, and therefore knows everybody's desires and is facilitating these desires. Uh, the Supreme Lord, Krishna, knows if you have the desire to serve him or the desire to enjoy on your own, to enjoy separately from him. And he will facilitate uh, those desires either way. If one, in the core of one's heart, wishes to serve Krishna, he will arrange things in order to uh, facilitate that service. But if one wants to remain stuck in material consciousness, the Lord will also facilitate uh, will facilitate the circumstances for that. Oh, you like to eat meat? Okay, I will give you a tiger's body. Oh, you're attracted to all of these nasty things. Okay, you can be in a fly's body. Uh, oh, you want to perform these sinful activities? I will arrange your life so that you have the opportunity to perform those sinful activities. Then the question might arise, does the Supreme Lord uh, share in the guilt for our sinful activities? After all, if I, abet somebody, there's this criminal charge, aiding and abetting. If I assist somebody in, bank robbery or murder or something, then I'm an accomplice, right? And I get punished as well, because I am, according to the laws, also at fault. Does this apply to the Supreme Lord? And the answer is no, obviously. The Supreme Lord is never overcome by pious or sinful activities, because the Supreme Lord is simply providing the facilities, uh, is not actually taking part in the activities themselves. It is like if I rent an apartment and then perform some criminal activity within the apartment, my landlord is not automatically implicated in that criminal activity. Because although he provided the facilities, he is not actually attached to the activities that are happening in the apartment itself. And this is the nature of the Supreme Lord. Everything rests in him, but he is still aloof from the material energy, or from his energies. Actually, our position, our philosophy, is that everything is Krishna. It's all of these Y words at the beginning of this verse. Yasmin yato yahi yena chayasya yasmad yasmi yata yaruta yastiva para parova. That, in any condition, because of anything, at any time, at any place, in any relationship, all of these things are simply the manifestations of the Lord, manifestations of the Lord's energy specifically. And we understand that the Lord, that the Lord's energy is the Lord. Krishna's energy is Krishna, but Krishna is not Krishna's energy. The example is given in the Shastras, uh, by the Acharyas. It's just like a flower, right? And the fragrance from the flower. The fragrance is emanating from the flower, but is not the flower itself. Although the flower is the controller and source of the fragrance. So the Lord actually never actually has contact with the material energy, even though it extends from him, even though it is emanating from him. And it is this material energy that is actually uh, the active principle in the material manifestation. Trying to remember the verse. Prakrite kriyamanani sarvagunai karmani sarvasha. I think I messed that up, but I think I got all the major words in there. which is that the material energy is actually, or the embodied living entity thinks himself the doer of activities that are actually done by the material energy. Uh, but because of ahankar vimudatma, that he is bewildered by this false ego, uh, that he is um, thinks himself the doer of the activities that are actually done by the three modes of material nature, because we cannot actually independently perform the activities that we engage in. We rely on the material elements, first of all, and then ultimately on the modes of material nature. And these three modes of material nature are the different varieties of the Prakriti, of the material energy of the Lord. And we can also understand that the Lord has a spiritual or superior energy also, which is responsible for his spiritual pastimes. The Lord, Krishna, is also above this energy, but this energy is internal, in that it facilitates his mm, confidential pastimes, in that it facilitates directly his enjoyment. Of course, everything is ultimately for the Lord's enjoyment, but the material energy and the spiritual energy operate differently, and that the material energy facilitates the attempts to enjoy by the particle or the small living entities, the jivatmas, and the internal energy facilitates the actual enjoyment of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, if we want to escape or become liberated from material bondage, from this material energy, we have to take shelter of the superior energy, which means that we have to become participants in Krishna's enjoyments rather than trying to enjoy ourselves. Because this is actually the nature of the internal potency of the spiritual energy. It's that its only uh, purpose is to facilitate Krishna's enjoyments. And that is the only choice that we have, whether to be in the material energy or the spiritual energy, meaning that the only choice that ultimately we have is to either try to enjoy ourselves, meaning that we will be under the material energy, because that is the nature of the material energy, or we can participate in Krishna's enjoyment, uh, which is the nature of the spiritual energy. And once we make that decision, we will come under the direction of the spiritual energy. And that is the process taught in all of the Bhakti Shastras. Prabhupada uh, repeats here the first part of the Mahavakya, the great statement of the Bhagavad Gita, Sarvadharman Pratyaja Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja. Give up all other duties, or give up all other dharmas, and surrender onto me. So this is ultimately the choice that we have. If we want to uh, actually have the bliss of Krishna consciousness, we have to give up all other processes, all of these processes that are under the modes of material nature. and just take up that process, which is in the internal potency of the Supreme Lord. But ultimately, it is up to all of us. We have to decide for ourselves what uh, process we're going to take up and what energy we are going to be under. Do we want to be under the material energy or the spiritual energy? And once we answer that question, we have to make the sacrifice, make the effort to mold our lives in such a way so that we are acting under the energy that we have chosen. Of course, we understand that during the early stages of Krishna consciousness and arts and vritti, uh, that there might be, some combination, you could say, that there's a clearing stage. But even then, we have to ask, are we working in such a way that our nartas are actually being nivertied, that we are actually clearing out all the unwanted things in the heart? Are we practicing Krishna consciousness with enough intensity to actually do that? Or are we just taking it as some, sort of religion or something to do or some, social thing or just some habit? We have to ask ourselves, are we actually putting in the intensity, putting in the effort to become Krishna conscious in this lifetime? Because it is possible, but we have to make the decision. So I will stop here. We have about 15 minutes for comments or questions or complaints. If anybody would like to jump in. Dinapalika Mataji.
Haribol, thanks for your class. It was yeah, really nice and nice to hear the Bhagavad Gita quotes. I have a two-part question because
All
we've
right.
been on this theme of with the pastime of Prahlad Maharaj of Krishna, protecting and taking care of his devotees, and you were speaking about that in the beginning.
Mhm.
And then you were speaking about how a child, and Prabhupada gives that example that a child is just totally, basically doesn't have anxieties about their maintenance because they're just dependent on the parent. So the first part of my question is, what is it, like, is it some facet of the false ego or something that kicks in later that, as we get older, there seems to be a trend of just anxiety taking over for one's maintenance. That's, oh, I'm not going to be taken care of or whatever it might be. And then, we can see adults they're at least in modern society usually in like perpetual anxiety about or a scarcity mentality.
Hmm. Well, I know one says everything's the false ego taking over, but I would say actually, to a large extent, uh, it's the intelligence taking over. Actually, it's recognizing that I want to be an eternal, that I want to have an eternal peaceful situation. But one can actually see once one develops some intelligence that this world is no place for a lady or gentleman to uh, quote or play off Srila Prabhupada. So it's not necessarily false ego um, overall that kicks in at a certain point in our maturation uh, that says, oh, this is a place of anxiety. This actually is a place of anxiety. Like if one is recognizing the material world as a place of anxiety, one's seeing it correctly. Uh, where the false ego comes in is that we think ourselves separated from Krishna. We think ourselves the controller and enjoyer, meaning that it's up to me to make this place a place of non-anxiety, to make this place facilitation for my enjoyment, which is you can say, the source of anxiety, one of the sources of anxiety. Uh, there's the false ego. The intelligence says, oh, this is a bad place. And then the false ego says, it's up to me to make it a good place. Uh, and then that's where, all of these things come in.
Thank you. That I had not thought about it like that, but that's a really good point, is it's the intelligence actually kicking in rather than, and then you said, and then the false ego kicks it in that, no, because I'm the doer, that means it's my job now to just make it, and I make it Vaikunta, even though it's
Yeah.
Kunta. And then I guess maybe you kind of already answered it, but how does one, like I've been meditating on, again, Krishna maintaining, now speaking about devotees, how Krishna is that supreme father, supreme mother that takes care of his devotees. And, whether you're in the ashram, in Grihastha ashram or this ashram, that ashram. And then I've also been thinking about how Gurudev said that he said in a lecture that for grihastas that follow the regulative principles, Krishna personally takes care of their maintenance. And I was like,
Mhm.
man, that's such a profound statement. So how can we, in whatever ashram we're in, whatever status of life, how can we cultivate more, like practically cultivate more dependence and more trust in Krishna instead of the aforementioned anxiety and false ego that
Hmm.
kicks in?
Yeah, so what comes to mind is, um, of course, reading and chanting are always there. Chanting is our main process. So, um, yeah, that will clear everything out. One idea that comes to mind uh, is, there are many grihastas in our movement that maintain themselves by preaching, right? They might distribute books as a full-time thing, and maintain themselves in that way or through some other preaching method, which will teach you to depend on Krishna a lot. You are a book distributor, of course, uh, and so that book distribution is one of the number one ways to learn dependence on Krishna. So if in your Grihasta Dharma or your Grihasta pastimes, you want to take on the uh, uh, means of livelihood of distributing books or something like that, that will teach you dependence on Krishna. I don't know, maybe some other uh, devotees, especially those who are grihastas, have ideas about other ways to do that. That's just what comes to my mind.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. All right. Any other comments or questions?
I think Janeshwari Mataji had her hand up for a second there.
Yeah, I saw that, but now it is down. So I don't know if
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
I
Um,
will.
Hare Krishna, thank you for your nice class. Um, Dinapalika's first question, what came to mind was, the jiva's false sense of independence. I remember Guru Maharaj always emphasizing that. But then you answered it, in her second part of the question about depending more on Krishna. And I also was thinking how devotees in the early days, they took a lot of risk for Krishna, and Prabhupada was very pleased with that. So when you take risk for Krishna, whatever it is, to through book distribution, or going to, like Prabhupada would tell a devotee couple, okay, get off the train and start a preaching center, start a temple. I mean, that's, that's taking great risk for Krishna, like Guru Maharaj and other great devotees went preaching behind the Iron Curtain, and then you really have to depend on Krishna. So yeah, that's just a few things that came to mind. I think these days there's more of a comfort zone. We don't take so much risk anymore. But the devotees that are Prabhupada's disciples, they were a lot more brave than us, I think. They were really, we can learn from them how they were depending on Krishna, and Krishna always reciprocated. I mean, my husband and I, we have a few, small experiences like that where Krishna reciprocated, like miraculously. And yeah, just shows that Krishna is really there. He's really, in the heart, and he knows what our desires are, and he reciprocates, like he says, as they reciprocate, I reward them accordingly. So, yeah, just a few thoughts. Thank you so much, Haribo.
Yeah, thank you. One thing that comes up, right, one thing that came to mind that's important to point out also in this discussion, is that sometimes Krishna taking charge of our affairs, Krishna being in charge, doesn't, or protecting his devotees, doesn't always necessarily look like protection externally. Janeshwari Mataji mentioned, devotees preaching behind the Iron Curtain. I think a week or two in class, I mentioned, the pastimes of the devotees in salted bread, right, who were sent to the gulag. We shouldn't think that, oh, Krishna's not protecting them while, or not reciprocating with them while they were there. Yeah, I think we can say pretty confidently that, the devotees whose passing is described in that book, went back to Godhead, right? Was, uh, Krishna was looking after them in these dangerous situations, even if kind of externally you could say, come on, Krishna, what are you doing? Tarka Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for your class. With regards to the question about developing dependence upon Krishna, my best understanding begins with, as you said, hearing and chanting, very importantly. That's the foundation. If you hear Srimad Bhagavatam class every day, you will understand philosophically how you are always dependent upon Krishna. If you are chanting Hare Krishna nicely, you will realize practically how you are dependent upon Krishna by one means or another. And in many cases, it will be revealed to you by Krishna, or by Krishna's arrangement, your life circumstances will be engineered such that you will have no alternative but to come to the conclusion that you're dependent upon Krishna. Draupadi did not arrive at the conclusion that she was dependent upon Krishna by studying Srimad Bhagavatam and chanting Hare Krishna necessarily. It was simply a logical conclusion. She tried to protect herself initially and then realized the circumstances were such that she had no alternative but to depend upon Krishna for her protection. The circumstances were engineered. And in the case of the Pandavas, Mother Kunti prayed actually for calamity to come into her life, because by that means one is forced to depend upon Krishna, to remember Krishna. Because what alternative do you have? There's no other option. That's Krishna's mercy, that by his arrangement, you are left with no alternative. You have no choice. You have to take shelter of Krishna. There is no other shelter. So the progression of Krishna consciousness is such that you come to the realization gradually, by one means or another, that you have no choice. There are no alternatives. You can try to take shelter of sense gratification, or intoxication or whatever, but devotees have more sense than that. Things will happen in your life, whether by the playing out of your karma or by Krishna's direct arrangement. The circumstances of your life will gradually, more and more, bring you to the realization that you have no choice but to depend upon Krishna. It just becomes inescapable, an inescapable realization. I think for many devotees, if not all devotees, that's the way it happens. That you invoke Krishna's mercy by your service. Krishna makes the arrangements for you to come closer to him. You are obliged to take his shelter because you have no other alternative. So Krishna is known as Hari for that reason. You approach Krishna, you please Krishna. If you manage to endear yourself to Krishna even a little bit, he takes everything away. And why? So that you have no other shelter left. There's nothing left but Krishna for you. Anyway, that's my my thoughts on the matter. It's 8:00.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Any last minute comments? Right. Srimad Bhagavatam ki.
I guess it's too late, but I had a comment and
Oh.
a question. Are the deities? Okay. I was wondering about comparing Draupadi's surrender to Prahlad's surrender, in the sense that Draupadi, as Tarka Prabhu pointed out, she tried to protect herself initially, before surrendering, when she couldn't protect herself. In Prahlad's case, in all the instances that he was, when his father and his father's henchmen tried to kill him, he never tried to protect himself. So I was wondering about that subtle distinction about their bhakti, in that sense, and their surrender. Any comments? I see Tarka Prabhu has his hand. Oh, he took it down.
I think. Yeah.
I have my hand up because I
Yeah.
want to say that Prahlad Maharaj was more advanced than Draupadi. It's actually that simple. Draupadi had to come to the conclusion that she was dependent upon Krishna. Prahlad Maharaj didn't have to come to that conclusion. He already understood it. By dint of hearing from Narada Muni, he understood clearly, without any question. He knew unequivocally that he was completely dependent upon Krishna, and he had already taken complete shelter of Krishna exclusively. Draupadi had not come to that platform as yet.
Right. So I think that answered the question. All right.
Well,
So
it brings another question because
follow up. Okay.
because in one sense we could say that, well, Krishna helps those who help themselves. I mean, it's kind of natural if somebody's throwing a punch at you, you're gonna try to evade it or do something to protect yourself in a sense. So does it always mean in that sense that the person is less advanced, because just because one is defending the body?
Arca, your hand is up again.
Yes, this is a fantastic question. Best question. This question I have been contemplating for a long time. I'm working on writing an article on exactly this topic. Trying to, you may recall or not that I asked some questions about this in Bhagavatam class more than once, because it was on my mind, and so it's a real issue for devotees trying to understand clearly, what is my duty, what am I supposed to do under this or that particular situation, and the answer is that it's a matter of adhikar, that depending upon your degree of advancement and depending upon your particular circumstances, your proper course of action will differ. Prahlad Maharaj, 5-year-old boy, is naturally helpless. Draupadi, a woman, also helpless. Arjuna, his duty was different. His duty was not to take shelter of Krishna necessarily for his protection. His duty was to fight. And so depending upon the circumstances, that your duty will differ. There is a story of Sanatana Goswami and Rupa Goswami living in Radhakund. At the time, it was completely undeveloped. It was just jungle and very, very wild, untamed. Sanatana Goswami was living under a tree. And one day it happened that he was, I think he was getting water from Radhakund. And circumstantially, at the same time, a tiger showed up to drink some water. So a very dangerous circumstance. Bengal tigers are huge, and they regard human beings as a tasty treat. This came to the attention of Rupa Goswami, who chastised Sanatana Goswami because he accused him that, you are forcing Krishna to become your servant. The proper course of action for you is that you should construct a proper shelter simple, humble, austere, but you construct a hut to protect yourself so that you are not vulnerable to the attack of tigers. You shouldn't just be living and sleeping out in the open where the tigers can easily eat you. So you should be responsible and not force Krishna to become your servant by protecting you. So the instruction was that under such a circumstance, you take responsibility for yourself. To the extent that you can, you don't unnecessarily trouble Krishna, because we are Krishna's servants, not the other way around. It's our job to relieve Krishna of work, not that we create work for Krishna. But the relationship is ultimately one of complete dependence upon Krishna. And when the circumstances are right, we have no choice but to take shelter of Krishna and depend upon him for his protection. So it's tricky. It's not one size fits all. There's not one simple cut and dry answer. It depends upon the circumstances. It depends upon who you are and where you are and the particular situation. There's different factors that have to be taken into consideration. So the mentality, the mindset of a devotee is that as far as possible, he doesn't want to create work for Krishna. He doesn't want to trouble Krishna, doesn't want to bother Krishna, but he still understands that under all circumstances, he is fully dependent upon Krishna, that he actually cannot do anything without Krishna. Not a blade of grass can move without Krishna's sanction. Where does our ability come from? If I have the ability to defend myself in any sort of way at all, that ability, Krishna, is the ability in man. Everything is coming from Krishna. Everything is dependent upon Krishna. Krishna consciousness means that we are conscious of that fact, that everything is coming from Krishna. I am always dependent upon Krishna, but under certain circumstances, I'm obliged to act as a servant. I should be responsible. I should relieve Krishna of work, not create work for him. But within myself, I always understand that even when I'm acting in the capacity of a servant, still, nonetheless, I'm completely dependent upon Krishna. I'm able to act in the capacity of a servant only by the grace and mercy of Krishna. It's my constitutional position, but nonetheless, it's still dependent upon Krishna. Everything is dependent upon Krishna always. So all these subtleties are understood by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, chanting Hare Krishna, engaging ourselves always in rendering devotional service by one means or another. Krishna reveals all of it. Everything becomes clear. Is that okay?
That's for me. Pandit Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
Sorry, it took me a little while to get to the mic. Yes, and thank you for all the enlightening explanations. And so I'm still wondering, can we, because initially, Tarka Prabhu, you identified that Prahlad Maharaj is more advanced. But is that the gauge in that sense? Because Kshatriyas, other people protect themselves. But is that actually the gauge of one's devotion? Whether or not they protect themselves.
No, it's not necessarily the gauge, but it can be. it's not absolute. It's not necessarily the gauge, but if you compare Prahlad Maharaj to Draupadi, the fact is Dhruva Maharaj understood clearly his complete and absolute dependence upon Krishna, and he was already 100% surrendered to Krishna, completely dependent upon Krishna, and exclusively, nothing else. He had no difficulty to understand that. And Draupadi, by comparison, it took her a moment to realize that she was completely dependent upon Krishna. So, there's an obvious distinction in the consciousness, the mentality. Draupadi's first impulse was to hold on to her sari, rather than to immediately take shelter of Krishna. Dhruva's first impulse, by comparison, was just to remember Krishna. All he ever did was just remember Krishna. At no time was he attempting to fend for himself, because he was fully Krishna conscious from birth, from before birth. He had the most expert spiritual master, direct disciple of Narada Muni. So the facts, all of the facts were clearly known by Dhruva from the time he was born. For Draupadi, evidently, it was not immediately so clear. Took her a moment. But is that the gauge that one depends upon Krishna rather than defending? Obviously that's not always the case. Sometimes it's appropriate to defend, and that can be superior Krishna consciousness. So it's these things have to be learned, and in part by experience, that gradually one becomes expert in the prosecution of Krishna consciousness by practical application. And it takes time. But gradually one learns to understand what is the proper course of action. When is it appropriate to act, and when is it appropriate to just chant Hare Krishna? Generally, it can be said that for us, as far as possible, we take personal responsibility, and when we have no options left, then we depend upon Krishna. And having no other options, that happens all the time. There are certain things that we just have absolutely no control over. If you're distributing books, all you can do is make your best effort, and you have to depend upon Krishna for the result. You don't have absolute control over what happens. You just, you make your best effort. And the same is true for so many things that, all different areas of service. We make our best effort, and we depend upon Krishna for the result, because it's not under our control. If it's a question of defense, we make our best effort to defend. That was Srila Prabhupada's instruction, and which is another important point to understand. When there's some question as to what to do and what not to do, we take guidance from the spiritual master. And so and the spiritual master kindly offers his direction. So Srila Prabhupada instructed us many, many times on these subjects. He did not tell us that we should just sit down and chant Hare Krishna when a motorcycle gang is sticking shotguns in the window and blowing arms off devotees. Um, you know, this is I'm not making stuff up here. This is a real world example. When when there is some threat, we are obliged to take some action. If we have the means at all, we should. This body belongs to Krishna. I have to protect this body so that it may be utilized in Krishna's service. I can't allow someone to destroy Krishna's property. I have to protect. If it's my own body, I have to defend. If it's another devotee's body, I have to protect. That's the duty. That's the way Srila Prabhupada instructed us, that, if we're under attack, we have to defend. And if we're under attack with deadly force, Srila Prabhupada instructed us that we should be prepared to defend with deadly force. And he warned us that, you're in the material world, for God's sake, things are going to happen. It's a very dangerous place. There are people who are, there are serious demons, and we're declaring war on their kingdom by being devotees and by propagating Krishna consciousness. And we should expect that there will be pushback. And sometimes there will be casualties. Srila Prabhupada warned us. So he instructed us to be prepared appropriately, not just that we, and this contrasts with the biblical conception of turning the other cheek. Not entirely. Srila Prabhupada expressed that idea as well, that a devotee is not necessarily concerned for himself. He will tolerate. One should be more tolerant than a tree, right? So, but within reason, within certain limits, we can tolerate all kinds of offenses against ourselves. But the instruction of Rupa Goswami is that we should never tolerate offenses against other devotees. For ourselves, we don't care. Other devotees, we are obliged to defend them. We should never tolerate anyone's offense against another devotee. But if it's we will tolerate up till a point. If it's a question of doing harm, serious bodily harm, doing harm to Krishna's property, this body, our bodies are very important. Not because it's our body, but because it's Krishna's body. And it has the potential to do a lot of valuable service. And so it must be preserved in good working order in order to render that service. We should not allow anything to happen to it that's going to disrupt the capacity for this body to render service. That's just Krishna consciousness. Devotional service is the imperative. We want to render devotional service, and we will protect whatever is important for devotional service. So we can tolerate all kinds of offenses, but not if it's going to interfere with devotional service. So bodily harm is going too far. We are not supposed to tolerate bodily harm. We can tolerate all kinds of offenses. We can tolerate insults and so many things. But if it comes to the point of something that has the capacity to affect devotional service, to diminish devotional service, that's where we draw a line. Then we don't tolerate. But sometimes the circumstances are such that even then, there's nothing you can do. Devotees sometimes find themselves in circumstances where they are threatened with bodily harm, and there's nothing they can do about it. So what do you do then? And you chant Hare Krishna, and you depend upon Krishna. You have no alternative. But as far as possible, we will protect, we will defend when devotional service is at stake. But if it's merely something like an insult, or some minor bodily affront, someone may smack me in the face. It's painful, it's unpleasant, it's humiliating, but I can tolerate that. But if someone wants to do harm to the extent that it impacts my ability to render devotional service, then I should not tolerate, because the most important thing is service to Krishna. So there are the things that we can tolerate and the things that we should not tolerate. These are some of the things to learn. And there are more details. And gradually, by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam class and rendering devotional service, all of these things will be revealed and realized. Is that helpful?
I think it is.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And it just made me think. I've studied about Draupadi before, but I haven't really examined it from this question and this angle of what was Draupadi's purpose behind trying to protect herself. But maybe she was trying to protect Dharma, or trying to protect the men in the arena, but I'm not sure. I have to do some more research and see about that, if there was some other motive for her not throwing her hands up completely in the beginning.
It's a good point. We don't want to speculate about what was going on. I haven't heard anything authoritative on that specific question. So I don't want to comment on something that I don't really know about authoritatively, but that's an interesting question. What really was her motivation?
It also made me think of the pastime with Mother Ladini, your god sister that used to live in New Vrindavan and was killed in Africa, Liberia.
Right.
And the circumstances around her death was she was protecting the devotees.
Correct.
Yeah. So she wasn't concerned about her own protection.
Right.
And that led to her being killed. by her desire to protect the devotees.
Yeah, that's proper behavior. That's glorious. One could also argue that that if possible, it would be better to preserve your own life as a devotee rather than have, other devotees die and you also die. But, that's a judgment call that an individual has to make. And both can be correct. A devotee should be prepared to give his life for the protection of other devotees. And in this particular case, I think it was not necessarily clear that that this Mataji was herself going to be subject to death as a result of her efforts to try to protect the devotees. So it wasn't as though she just chose to give up her life needlessly. She didn't necessarily expect that she was going to be killed, but she wanted to try to protect the devotees by any means. Unfortunately, some damn demon chose to kill her as well. So her passing is very glorious. She's an extraordinary example, extraordinary personality. She was always a wonderful devotee, but to conduct herself with such courage under those circumstances, when another individual would simply be terrified and maybe try to flee, she was concerned with the welfare of the other devotees. You can imagine that Krishna has special rewards for her. Very special. Do you still have more angles on this? We've come up with a lot of questions. I'm impressed. You're very thoughtful. You've raised most of the issues that I have contemplated. You surprise me all the time. You could probably come up with some more angles.
Not at this time. So thank you so much for your contemplation, sharing so much of your realization on this topic.
Great questions. These are really good questions. That's really thoughtful. That's some deep thinking. It's good. Devotees should be thoughtful. These are, there's lots of things to think about in Krishna consciousness, and these are some of them.
Yeah, it makes me think about how, how they say that, it says in the Bhagavad Gita that what's daytime for a non-devotee is nighttime for a devotee, and vice versa. So as devotees, we can understand a little more the motive of devotees, but at the same time, pure devotees, we don't always understand what the motive is for some of their choices, and it's often a deeper reflection than what may come to my mind, and it has to do with their level of devotion and their level of vision and service. What will create the most Krishna conscious effect? What's best for this particular devotee? A lot of different factors that most people and most devotees are not thinking at from that level. But anyway, thank you so much, Prabhu. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for your questions. Yeah, different devotees. We have to be conscious of our level of advancement. We're not on the level of Prahlad Maharaj. We should not imitate. We should follow in the footsteps. Hare Krishna.